The Syrian government has rejected the Western accusations of chemical weapons used by Damascus against militants.
On behalf of the Syrian Arab Republic, I insist that Syria has completely given up its chemical weapons program. There are no chemical arms or agents in the country, nor has the army used toxic gas during its operations. From the very beginning of the conflict, we oppose the use of weapons of mass destruction that have been made and used by the US, the UK and France.
Miqdad said following the first chemical attack in Syria in 2013, the Syrian government asked the UN to investigate the case. The top Syrian diplomat added that Damascus is open to any UN probe into the use of chemical weapons, including this year's gas attack in Khan Sheikhoun in Idlib province that left dozens of people dead. Miqdad also accused foreign-backed terrorists of launching gas attacks in an effort to pave the way for the U.S. invasion of Syria. Later in his remarks, Syria's deputy foreign minister said that the U.S., Israel, and the regional allies have supported and harbored terrorists in order to overthrow the government in Damascus. We'll discuss this a little further with Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor at Politics First. You know, throughout this saga of chemical weapons use that the U.S. mainly has accused Syrian government forces of doing, there was no clear, logical explanation for the Syrian government to actually do this. And yet the U.S. does not even explain that. I mean, when you have the cases of other chemical attacks that doesn't involve government forces and accuses the opposition, the so-called opposition, the United States doesn't come out and voice that. Why is that?
Well, there is no logical explanation as to why the Syrian government would use chemical weapons, because they haven't. And we know since the beginning of 2014 that Syria, according to the United Nations, does not have chemical weapons. Now, we also need to bear in mind that despite there being a new American administration, the American policy on Syria has not changed. Donald Trump is maintaining the policy that the Syrian government has to be overthrown. And he has increased the amount of weapons being sent to the various terrorist groups in Syria, be it al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army. But also, Donald Trump constitutes an even bigger menace to Syria, because this April he set a very dangerous precedent. He launched 59 cruise missiles against a Syrian military installation. Now, that was very, very important, because under Barack Obama, Obama had managed to prevent the American military from becoming directly involved in the Syrian conflict. We know that Obama was supporting terrorist groups in Syria, but he did manage to keep the American military directly out of that conflict. However, Donald Trump has set a dangerous precedent, and it was very, very obvious, as you know, as soon as he launched that strike against Syria this April, that all the American government needed to launch further strikes against Syria was an allegation from their Wahhabist terrorist proxies on the ground of a chemical weapon being deployed by the Syrian military. We must also take into consideration that Donald Trump is beholden to Saudi Arabia and Israel. Donald Trump has long-standing personal and business ties with Saudi Arabia and Israel, and we know that Saudi Arabia and Israel are very keen for the Syrian government to be overthrown and for it to be replaced with an Islamist one. And of course, how do you do that? You bring in the American military, because even though the Syrian military has some of the most elaborate, potent air defense systems in the world, only the American military would be able to penetrate that. So these are dangerous times we're living in, but certainly it's very clear that ever since Donald Trump took office, and in particular since he launched that cruise missile attack against Syria this April, the Wahhabist terrorists in Syria now have an air force, and that is the United States Air Force.
Okay, thank you for that. Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor, Politics First.